everybody, it's your boy Captain Hunter coming at you again. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Make sure that you do me a favor. Make sure that you hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. Make sure that you hit that rate, subscribe, and share button. If you have been wondering where I've been, I'm making this. I'm definitely going to put this out in the audio. Definitely going to put this out in the audio for the audio audience out there. If you have been wondering where I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, and I have been working on a doctorate, which I'm almost finished with now, and so that's where I've been working on a doctorate, just about finished. And this particular article that we're going to discuss today came across my feed, and I wanted to discuss it. Right, so here you can see for the audio, for the video persons out there, they can see this is from the National Policing Institute. Pursuing excellence through science and innovation, right? And so so this article popped up and talks about the National Policing Institute's groundbreaking research in procedural justice training. Let's see, what difference does it make if police officers are trained to consistently treat everyone fairly and respectfully, to remain neutral, be active listeners, and exhibit trustworthy behavior? As I mentioned, as I'm studying my doctorate, I'm looking at police and morale, and what destroys supervisor morale and what destroys officer on lower level morale. And a lot of this is going to be intertwined with this particular article that we're going to read, right? So the National Policing Institute did this or released this study that was conducted by some PhDs. And we'll get into it, but I really think it's important that we understand, what this talks about, right? The first question that comes up here is, what does it mean when police officers treat people, the citizens, respectfully, fairly, be active listeners, and exhibit trustworthy behavior? This is known as procedural justice. This has been extremely important. A guy named Tom Tyler talked about this. He's a Yale professor, and this goes back to the creation of the modern day, what we would call the modern day police officer or policing, under the system that was created in the metropolitan area of London, under a guy by the name of Peel, Sir Robert Peel, and Robert Peel's principles. Whether or not he actually came up with these principles is debated. However, we're going to assign them to this guy named Robert Peel. Treat people with respect. The police are the community are the police. The amount of force that is used when conducting an arrest or performing your duties should be in proportion to the level of active resistance, all this different type of stuff that researchers have come to find out years later. And this is going to be another confirmation of it, right? So this, again, reading from the email that I got, the National Police Institute, in partnership with the universities in 3 major cities, teamed up to research this very question. In the study, our chief science advisor, Dr. David Weisburd, and institute researchers looked at the impacts of procedural justice training for officers in 120 crime spot areas in 3 different cities. The multi-year project resulted in 14 fewer crime incidents and 60 fewer arrests in areas where specially trained officers worked. These and other significant findings from the study have potential to change how policing services are delivered in the highest crime areas, improving community safety and interactions with police, right? So we go to this Time article, and I want to read from this Time article. I want to read from this Time article here. I want to read from it because I think that it's important. Police. Now, this article was written November 2nd, 2022. And it says, police are turning to an old tactic to fight the surge in violence, but it needs a rethink. Kind of cryptic. What's the old tactic, right? Well, what is the old tactic that police officers are turning to? So let's get into it. Like other cities across the country, Denver has consistently struggled with shootings and homicides since the start of the pandemic. Both 2020 and 2021 had record years for homicide, with 100 killings in 2021. To respond to the violence, the Denver Police Department announced a program in May 2021 to identify hotspots in the city where most of the shootings were being reported. So let me just pause right there from the reading of this, right? So following the events of Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, 2015, and then, of course, following the death of George Floyd in 2020, there were two different effects known as the Ferguson effect and the Minneapolis effect. The Minneapolis effect does not get quite the amount of acknowledgement. However, it is something that a particular person, academic, I believe it was a judge by the last name of Castle, depending on how he pronounces it, Cassell, talked about this and the Minneapolis effect. And not only did police officers, both of these effects had different commonalities, and they had a reduction amount of officers, reduction in people who were interested in becoming police officers. They had a reduction in proactive policing, and the reduction of proactive policing and less officers on the street resulted in what many are calling the Minneapolis effect, wherein there was crime spikes, shootings, and murders, homicides, right? So this is, while it's not linking it directly, I'm telling you that this is what will be considered part of the Minneapolis effect, 2020 and 2021. To respond to the violence, the Denver Police Department announced this program and identified hotspots. The 5 hotspots identified by Denver Police Department cover a very small portion of the city, but they make up a quarter of the violence reported in Denver in 2020. The Denver Police Hotspot program involves more patrols by officers, including cops walking the beat, and attempting to build relationships with residents in the area. Getting officers out of the cars, we can connect with people, we can disrupt the crime patterns to deter criminal activity from occurring in the first place. Then Police Chief Paul Pezon said when the program was launched in 2020. A year later, the tactic appears to have at least been partially successful. At three other hotspot zones, violence went down. At one of the hotspots, non-fatal shootings, there's still shootings, they're just non-fatal, and homicides went from 20 in 2020 to 3 so far in 2022. At another, there were 37 shootings in 2020 and just 5 in the first 8 months of 2022. 2 of the hotspots saw increases, though, with one downtown spot going from 28 shootings and homicides in 2020 to 58 from January to August 2022. New focus on an old tactic. What is this old tactic, right? Let's get into it. Hotspot policing is a popular law enforcement strategy that goes back for decades, but police are increasingly instituting it to combat gun violence, which has spiked in the wake of the pandemic. In addition to Denver, Salt Lake City, Tacoma, Washington, and Buffalo, New York have launched or stepped up hotspot policing programs. There have been a large number of these studies suggesting hotspot policing is effective, said David Weisburd, a criminologist at George Mason University. Weisburd co-authored a study published in the fall of 2020 that found that the police should be treating people in hotspots areas with respect. That being said, we all know the reaction of the community is dependent on what police are doing and how they're implementing this method. However, hotspot policing has been criticized as also opening the door to police abuse. By flooding high crime areas with officers, authorities hope they can disrupt the unchecked cycle of violence and stop crime before it escalates. However, like most law enforcement interventions in poor minority communities, it can generate a high level of tension between police and the residents. This in turn can lead to a further breakdown of trust between police and the minority communities, which is already fractured to begin with. The most well-known of hotspot policing was how it was deployed during a stop and frisk era in New York City under Mayor Bloomberg, when police officers stopped people they believed were involved in criminal activity. These searches rarely resulted in a weapon and other illicit items being found. Studies later confirmed that most of the people stopped by the police were young, Black, and Latino men. It can be very stigmatizing for people. There are negative consequences in terms of placing a location and placing people on a list. Dr. Joseph Richardson, a gun violence researcher and professor of the University of Maryland, says, "Are their rights being violated? Are the rights of their families being violated every time they step outside? Are people constantly being monitored? These are questions that need to be considered." So what's the new approach, right? A new approach. Let me just pause right there. Right. So many times, police officers will write in their reports, This is a high crime area. I know this area to be frequented by persons looking for prostitutes, persons looking to buy and sell drugs, things along those lines. And they use that as a method of putting things in their report to build up their reason for suspicious activities and things along those lines. Now, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying that is something that has to be looked at. And it has been legally established through criminal law, through judgments, court proceedings, that you cannot stop individuals simply for walking around in certain neighborhoods. No matter how bad the neighborhood is, there has to be other extenuating circumstances. And part of that extenuating circumstances, part of those other circumstances that police officers put in their reports, is the fact that they're in these neighborhoods. So they put that in these neighborhoods, and they also put, they're reaching in their pockets. They conducted a hand-to-hand sale, or what looked to be a hand-to-hand sale. They looked menacingly. They kept digging in their pockets. They exhibited some type of irregular, abnormal behavior that good, upstanding citizens more than likely would not have committed. So these are things that officers use. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that these are things that need to be, that are looked at. And this can be seen as a criminal line, and we have to walk the fine line. That's what the doctor's saying, and that's what I'm saying as a police officer or former police officer, is that we have to walk this particular line. A new approach. As a result, experts like Weisburd emphasize that hotspot policing is ripe for new approach. The goal of Weisburd's study was to find out how training officers on how to better interact with community members would affect the work needed for hotspot policing. To do this, the researchers focused on high-risk areas in 3 cities: Houston, Texas, Tucson, Arizona, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. Officers were assigned hotspot areas in these cities and were divided up into 2 groups. One of the groups received 40 hours of training on procedural justice, everything we just talked about, treating people with dignity and respect, making sure that you listen to people's complaints, both the complainant, the victim, and the defendant, and just give everyone a chance to speak, right? Which focuses on the concept of treating residents fairly and with dignity. It took 40 hours to do that, which is crazy when you think about it, right? We gave the police officers 5 days of training. There's a lot of training in policing. Quite often, trainings are half a day or a day or something like that, Weisburd said. We talked about different communities and how they might respond to policing. We talked about implicit bias. The officers were then sent out to focus on these areas. The study found that hotspot policing works best when police treat people with respect and treat them fairly. There were 14% fewer crime incidents in the areas where officers had done the procedural justice training. So 14% is not an impressive number, but it is a start. It is a start, right? Everything's not going to be successful, but it is a start. We found that this training changes the behavior of police in hotspots. Very important sentence there. We found that this training changes the behavior of police in hotspots. Weisburd said, "What is the biggest issue with policing in most cities? It's harassment and violence, right up there with disrespect. In simpler terms, the study showed that police don't have to be respectful to In simpler terms, the study showed that police don't have to be disrespectful. I know I was reading that wrong. To do their jobs well. In today's climate around public safety and crime, there tends to be an either-or position that must be taken between law enforcement being effective and the effort to reform and change police culture. This study is trying to show that both can happen at the same time, according to Weisburd. So why aren't all police departments doing this kind of training? That's a question many experts have. What kind of effect would this program have if it was not only applied in hotspots, but also across an entire city, Weisburd asked. While it's unclear what the method has been for Denver police and whether officers had any kind of additional training, the new police chief said that the police have been working with community organizations in efforts to stem the violence, so it's not just being pushed somewhere else. I'm not flooding an area with police officers to move the problem elsewhere. They're embedding themselves in the community to change the dynamics of an area so they're not hotspots for a crime, DPD Chief Ron Thomas said. Okay, so that's from this year. Time magazine released this particular article, right? Again, the name of the article is "Police Are Turning to an Old Tactic to Fight the Surge in Violence." The old tactic would be officers flooding the areas where hotspots are going on. So I'm looking up this particular guy. Is it Michael? what's his name? Michael Weisburd, right? Last name is Weisburd, Weisburd. I believe his first name is Michael. What's his name here? Anyway, so I looked him up, and David Weisburd. So I looked him up, and he's got a good. I'm not going to play this particular video for the audio out there. For the audio out there, it's David Weisburd on how neighborhoods and police can work together to reduce crime, and this is from Academic Influence, that particular website. And so he's given a speech, and I listened to it's about a 20-minute video. Got through about 8 minutes of it. I stopped because I want to make this video. But in the video, he talks about this idea of what's different between the old tactic, the broken windows style of policing, broken windows being if police officers deal with the smaller types of offenses, right? Whether it's broken windows on a building, broken license plates hanging wrongly on a motor vehicle, people standing on the corner, taking care of jaywalking, taking care of littering. If you handle the little stuff, then the big stuff never gets to evolve. Well, what has been studied, and what we just read from the Bloomberg era in New York City, the stop and frisk era, there was a difficulty there between who to stop, when to stop them, and things along those lines. And as studies have shown, they were mostly stopping Black and Latino men, and yet coming up with nothing, essentially. And so this has been problematic for law enforcement. It's been a huge embarrassment for the law enforcement community, because they've been going out there trying to suppress crime. So what's interesting about this, and if you look at the Time magazine article there, right, one of the last sentences is, or the last paragraph, so it says, while it's unclear what the method has been for Denver police and whether officers had any kind of additional training, so we don't even know if all of, well, what a sentence, I didn't even catch that the first time. So we didn't even know if everything that the Weisburd training was effective, right? Okay. The new police chief said that the police have been working with community organizations in efforts to stem the violence, so it's not just being pushed somewhere else. So in this going back to the YouTube video from David Weisburd on how neighborhoods and police can work together to reduce crime from Academic Influence, in that David Weisburd claims that when they do these studies, that they're really locating, depending upon the size of the city, that it's 2 or 3 or 4 streets that are causing 50% of the crime within neighborhoods. And I can tell you as a police officer, that is absolutely true. You know, there are streets here in Waterbury that we just knew were just a problem. And there were 2, 3, maybe 4 streets, maybe 5 streets that we just knew anytime a call was there or there was a shooting going down, we could almost guess where the street was. Almost to the letter, almost all the time. And so what David Weisburd has suggested from his research is that the research, what he's saying is that once you clamp it down by using his tactics of being nice or introducing police legitimacy training, targeting the hotspots, not being disrespectful to the residents and to the citizens there, that you suppress the crime, and that crime does not actually move to another location. That's what his study has shown. You can watch the YouTube video, watch it all. I'm certainly interested in much of what Michael Weisburd has said. So this is just one tactic in all that. So this is what hotspot policing is. Hotspot policing is targeting the one particular area, 2, 3, 4, 5 streets, getting police officers in there, and they're suggesting going in there with a professional attitude that is more accommodating to the individuals and to the residents who live there, and targeting, albeit there's a nuance to how you actually, and I admit this as a police officer, how do you go in there, how do you get foot patrols in there, bike patrols in there, canine patrols in there, if you have mounted police, target these particular areas and yet not engage or in some type of profiling, right? How do you get in there and do that, right? How do you get in there and demonstrate that? So that's a difficulty that that law enforcement is going to have to solve. So let me know your thoughts and your opinions about this, and what your thoughts about hotspot policing. Is it effective? Is these different methods of procedural justice effective? Going in there, being nice to people, not displaying disrespect towards people. Can you really make changes and differences? When the studies were done, it's 14%. It's 14% in the right direction. Not overwhelming, right? This is not talking about a 90% reduction in crime. And according to Weisburd's research, not mentioned here, but as again mentioned in the YouTube video, once you suppress the crime in one particular area, he's saying that it doesn't move to another area, and even those other areas may even get better. I doubt the validity of that. I'm going to be honest with you. As my time in law enforcement, we knew that we pushed people around, and we knew we did. We knew it. So, but this is what his research is studying, has demonstrated. I don't know how much I believe that, but I like to be a facts, data, and statistics guy. But I can tell you as a person who was there. And this is the problem that a lot of, I'm going to be honest again, this is the problem that a lot of officers, or even a lot of lay people just in general, have with academics, right? They just don't see them as being real world and really, really practical. This article right here says that we don't even know what the method of the Denver Police Department was. Was it because of hotspot policing that actually suppressed the crime? Or was it the addition of body cameras? I don't know. Maybe crime just went down. It's really, really difficult to tell, right? Maybe in enough, it could be a bunch of different things. I could speculate all day, but let me know your thoughts, your opinions about hotspot policing. If you're not checking out my other videos on Captain Hunter's podcast on YouTube, make sure that you do that, because there I'm really diving into men's issues, making men the best that we can be. Keep this channel to talking about keep this channel to talking more about police related issues. Captain Hunter's podcast. We're going to talk more about, and this is on YouTube, Captain Hunter's podcast on YouTube. We're going to talk about more about men's issues, right? So therefore, we don't have to worry about coming in contact with the police, right? And how we can save our communities, and how we can do a better job about being fathers and husbands and uncles and all this kind of stuff, right? So let me know your thoughts and your opinions. Everyone, much love and peace.